Hey, it's Jennifer Iserloh, and welcome to Healthy Cheats, where I teach you how to live the good life that's healthy too. Today I'm going to teach you how to cook one of my favorite things to order at a French bistro. It's steak frites, which is basically steak. I like to use filet mignon and a side of fries, but I'm going to show you the way to do it a lot healthier. So to get started, we're going to take a look at the fries. Now, if you have a craving for a French fry and you've got to have the white stuff, the frozen is actually the way to go because it's a lot lower in the bad kinds of fat. And since you're baking it, you're cutting way back on calories. But I'm going to show you a great tip for getting them extra crispy. So you want to make sure that you have a baking tray like this, and you're going to want to grease it with just a little bit of olive oil. And olive oil is great because it's the good kind of fat that doesn't harm your heart. And this is going to provide a nice layer of oil that'll really help those fries to crisp up. Now, if you like sweet potato fries like I do, you can always go that route. But when it comes to a true fry addict, sometimes only the white fries will do. So it's as simple as this. We'll pop this in the oven for about 20 minutes, and it'll give us a chance to make our steaks. So when you're picking out your cuts of filet mignon, you want to make sure that the surface of the meat is very red. If you see a little brown, that usually means that it's been exposed to air. It doesn't necessarily mean it's spoiled, but the best cuts are the bright red cuts that you see here on this plate. So the next thing you want to do is think about the seasoning, and this is where you really add tons of flavor to the meat. You always want to season this up with a lot of salt in the beginning. So I have a couple different types of salt here. I've got kosher, which a lot of chefs use, and it has sort of a medium flake. And this is great to start to put on your meat right from the beginning before you sear it. Now I have two other versions that I'm going to garnish with afterwards. So I'm going to do 2 layers of salt. And what I like about these two versions is that they're flaky and they have a beautiful texture, a little bit of crunch, which gives you that tooth feel, and they look absolutely gorgeous on the surface of the steak. This one happens to be pink, so when it comes to colored sea salts or colored salts, they're usually picking up minerals or things from the environment. It doesn't necessarily affect the taste, but it certainly does look pretty. So to season our meat up, the first thing we'll do is liberally use our kosher salt here. And I like to sprinkle up high because that gives a really nice even dusting so that you're not missing any parts on the surface of the meat. So we'll do both sides, turn them over, and now I'm going to crush up some peppercorns. And I like to go really light on the pepper because I really want to savor and taste the juicy meat because I want the meat to really be the showcase item here. So I'm crushing the peppercorn with the skillet just because I like my peppercorn to be chunky. But again, not too much pepper because it can actually be pretty spicy and take away from that unique flavor of the steak. So our next step is to really heat the skillet, and this is going to ensure that you get an extra dark golden sear on the meat. Next, I'm going to use a little bit of olive oil. I'm using the light olive oil because it has a higher smoking point, but I'm still getting the good benefits of olive oil because it is mono and polyunsaturated, and we know that that type of fat is okay for our health. We want to just take a look at the oil, and the great thing is that the oil will move around the skillet and start to look less viscous. It'll almost look like water, and that's when you know it's ready to put your steaks in. And I'll tell you, nothing makes the kitchen smell better than when steaks hit that skillet. Now there's no need to really press them down at this point, and you don't want to move them right away because you're going to really ruin that sear. So you want to leave them in place, and the protein will start to seize up. So it'll stick to the skillet, but when it releases easily, then you know it's time to turn them. So in the meanwhile, we can slice up some parsley. And parsley is a great thing to add to any dish because it's going to add a layer of color and make your dish look absolutely gorgeous. But it also happens to be high in things like vitamin K. Let's see how our steaks are doing. Perfect. Now remember, since filet mignon is a very lean cut of meat, there's not a lot of fat in it. You don't want to cook it all the way through on the stove top. The stovetop is a direct form of heat and has a tendency to really dry it out. So what we're going to do is use two forms of heat. Stovetop, and now we're going to pop it in the oven so it can finish cooking through. So while the steak is finishing the oven, let's talk about the wine. Now to me, you can't really enjoy a piece of perfectly cooked, juicy red meat without a big glass of red wine. But in terms of calories, you need to be careful about the pour. So a 5-ounce pour, which looks a little something like this, is about 120 calories. So just remember, when you're enjoying that glass of wine, you want to limit the amount. So let's see how that steak's doing. It certainly smells good. Now you can see the gorgeous brown crust that we got on top from searing. Now I'm going to show you a technique they use in many restaurants. We call it the squeeze test. And essentially you're squeezing the meat to determine whether it's done. Slicing at this point would mean that all the juices run out, and that's definitely something you want to avoid. If you're first starting out with the squeeze test, essentially when you squeeze this part of your hand, that's how the steak should feel for medium rare. So our next step is just to let the steak rest. Now why this is important is we want to make sure that all the juices will go throughout the meat proteins. So essentially when the steak cooks, the protein seize up and the juice will run out. But if you let it rest for about 2 or 3 minutes, the proteins have a chance to relax, and that makes sure that the juices stay in, and it'll be perfect and juicy every time. So while that's resting, we're gonna pull our fries out. Now you can hear how crispy those are already, just by the way they move on the pan. And I like to hit these with a little bit of that beautiful flaked salt, and also a little parsley. This adds nutrition, makes it a little festive, and it gives it that steak frite feel. Pile these on. And again, no one's going to know that these are frozen. There are about 3 grams of fat per serving, which is definitely a boon because we do have a little bit more fat with the steak. And remember, when it comes to red meat, it tends to be high in saturated fat or the bad kind of fat. So we just want to limit the amount that we eat. So maybe you're enjoying it 2 or 3 times a month. This steak looks perfect. And we'll do a little garnish with some of that rose sea salt, just a bit on top to add texture. So now you have a healthier steak frite recipe that any beef lover will enjoy. I'm Jennifer Iserloh. Thanks for joining me on Healthy Cheats. Here's to your health. Hey everyone, if you have a great recipe that you'd like to see me do in a healthier way, just let me know. You can send a video response or ask your questions in the comments below. I can't wait to hear from you.